couple of weeks ago, I went on a California road trip, visiting Knott's Berry Farm and Six Flags Magic Mountain. I rode many great rides, and today I'm going to rank the top 10 coasters from the entire trip. Real quick, I'd just like to point out that the rides Accelerator, Montezuma the Forbidden Fortress, Riddler's Revenge, Superman Escape from Krypton, and Scream were all the major rides that were closed during my visits to the parks. Also, I'd like to say that these are my opinions. Everybody is entitled to their own opinions, so if you disagree with what I say in this video, feel free to nicely share your opinions in the comments below. So, with that said, let's get started. Kicking off our list is Sierra Sidewinder and Knott's Berry Farm. This ride is crazy. The park even calls it a family coaster, but trust me, it is not a family coaster. This ride is very intense and very well paced. I even grayed out a little bit on the helix. We rode the ride when there wasn't anybody on the other side of the car, and let me just say, that was crazy. The spinning is just, I can't even put it into words. Overall, I thought it was a great, intense, and very well-paced ride. Number 9. Batman the Ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This Batman clone is way less intense than the Bat clone at Six Flags over Georgia. Although it was very smooth, something I couldn't say about the Georgia one, it just wasn't as intense, and it honestly surprised me. I went in expecting something similar to the over Georgia experience, but it was completely different. It just didn't have the same amount of whip, and it just wasn't as crazy. I just didn't get off the ride feeling out of breath like you do on the Over Georgia one, even when we rode in the back. Overall, it was still a very intense ride that I still thoroughly enjoyed. Number 8. Apocalypse the Ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This GCI wooden roller coaster seems to be very polarizing. Though I love it, McKaylee, my sister, hates it. I think she hated it because it was not a smooth ride and she got stapled very badly, so I could definitely understand why it hurt her. But as someone who didn't get stapled, I love this ride. The first half is just insane with a wonderful pacing and very good floater airtime, and although it slowed down a lot in the second half, it more than made up for it in the first half. Overall, I really enjoyed this ride and would highly recommend it as long as you don't get stapled. Number 7. West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This Premier Rides quadruple launch Mobius Loop coaster is a very long ride, featuring 4,000 feet of track. I didn't think the launches were very powerful, well, at least compared to another Premier Rides launch coaster in the park, but the ride definitely makes up for it with the layout. It is very fast-paced and fairly smooth. My one issue is that the trains are the worst. Being a kid, my head doesn't clear the comfort collars yet, meaning I get a lot of head banging on those super annoying little pieces of rubber that just hit up on your jawbone. It's terrible. The trains are also very cramped, even for me. Overall, West Coast Racers is still a very fun ride, and I still really enjoy it. Number 6. Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain, aka the Other Premier Rides Multi-Launch Coaster. The Other Premier Rides Multi-Launch Coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain is Full Throttle. The first launch out of the station is very powerful, and the first inversion is one of my favorites. The middle of the ride kind of meanders, and the middle launches are just okay, but I will say, when the train stalls in between the second and third launches on that Sidewinder, it is like a twisted beyond vertical spike, and that is really fun. The airtime you get on the final drop is insane, and the brakes on the drop make it even stronger, especially in the front. My one issue with that is that the brakes do slam you forward, and when you're facing straight down and being ejected out of your seat, let's just say it is not the most pleasant experience. Overall though, Full Throttle is a very good ride. Just make sure you watch out for that gut punch. Number 5. Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm. This Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster is very good, featuring hang time, air time, and a little bit of whip. I went in thinking that this would be okay, but I was wrong. It wasn't amazing, but there were some definite surprises. The pause after the lift will surprise me because it is a lot steeper than it looks. You are being held in by your restraint for several seconds, and it is a really weird feeling. The drop gives a very strong ejector pop and is overall one of my favorite first drops. There isn't much hang time on the ride. In fact, I'd say there's more airtime than hang time, but there still is some hang time, and overall it is still a very good ride. Number 4. Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This B&M flyer is insane. It is very similar to Manta except for two things. It is on a mountain, making the ride experience feel more like you're flying, and the pretzel loop is way more intense. I would say the first half is fairly tame, but the second half is definitely super intense. The insane second half kicks off with a whippy overbank turn into the most demented element ever, the pretzel loop. It is crazy intense, and though I do think it is still a little overrated, it is still crazy. Then you head into a pretty good roll into one of my favorite finales, a very sharp turn that presses you into your restraint. But because you're flying, you're facing down, and you're a good 120 feet minimum above a waterfall and some sharp rocks. It is just a crazy finale, but it's not done. Then you get a nice little airtime pop into the brakes. Overall, this is a just insane ride, and it might be too intense for a lot of people. These next 3 rides are just insane rides, every single one leaving me hitting the brake run just mind blown. 2 of these rides are known around the enthusiast community as some of the greatest coasters of all time, and the other one is just very underrated in my opinion. Number 3. Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This Mobius Loop RMC hybrid roller coaster is a great ride, and though I think it is overrated, I still think it is still an amazing ride. It is a very long ride because you go around twice, and although it is my least favorite RMC, it is still amazing. My issues with this ride are that the second lift hill is very slow because it's supposed to wait for the next train to come around to duel. But it usually doesn't, and you just go up the lift hill super slow, even slower than Blue Hawk Fur, and that's ridiculous. That shouldn't be allowed. Another thing is that the trains aren't very comfortable. I don't know why. The same trains on Twisted Cyclone and Iron Gwazi don't bother me, but these do. And it kind of hurts on the ejector hills, especially on the first ones. I think what might be different is that the piece of the lap bar that sits on your lap might be profiled a little differently since it's an older train, but I don't know. It's weird. Also, I find RMCs usually to be perfectly smooth, but this one had a little bit of a shake to it. It is still extremely smooth. In fact, it's one of the smoothest coasters I've ridden, but it is definitely not perfect, like some of the other RMCs I've ridden. Those are just perfectly smooth. Some of the elements also just felt a little unnatural, like the high five on the green side. It just felt weird, and it just wasn't a very comfortable ride experience. Overall, Twisted Colossus still left me mind blown, and is still one of my favorite rides ever, and I absolutely love it. Number 2. Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. This CCI Woody is definitely a worthy 100th roller coaster. It is relentless and gives very good airtime. It also gives insane laterals. This ride also just lasts forever, being over 4,500 feet long and only 118 feet tall. The final helix is a solid 10 seconds of insane laterals. In fact, every single turn on this ride gives strong laterals. There is literally no banking on the entire ride. The ride is also super smooth despite being retracked over 5 years ago and very intense. The only con is that the capacity is terrible. For such a long ride, it only has 2 trains, meaning that there cannot be many riders on the ride at a time, and the ops aren't the best. This bothered me even though it was a station wait all day. I barely had to wait for it. But that was just because it wasn't a very busy day the day we were there. Overall, Ghost Rider is just an insane ride and is totally worth making the trip out to California to go ride it. Number 1. Wonder Woman Flight of Courage at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This new for 2022 RMC Raptor at Six Flags Magic Mountain is one of the best coasters I've ridden. It has insane ejector airtime and is very well paced. I went into this ride thinking that it would just be okay based off what I've heard, and boy, were my expectations exceeded. This ride was very well paced, despite people saying it loses a lot of speed at the end. I did not find that to happen. And while those final hills are definitely not as strong as the ones in the beginning, they are still very good. I found that this ride is focused more on sustained airtime than the quick pops that are on the other RMCs. And while that is still great, that means that the ride is more light ejector than that strong ejector that we're used to on the other RMCs. But the drop off the mid-course is demented. It was just, I was not expecting that at all. You are launched out of your seat, where if that restraint wasn't there, you'd probably launch, 30 feet in the air. It is just crazy. It almost hurts. It is one of the strongest moments of airtime I've ever experienced. The first drop is just almost 90 degrees at 130 feet. That's just crazy. Overall, Wonder Woman Flight of Courage is one of the best coasters of all time in my opinion, and earns a spot far into my top 10. I just cannot say enough great things about this ride, and absolutely you should go out and ride it. So that was my ranking of the top 10 best coasters at Knott's Berry Farm and Six Flags Magic Mountain. Both of these parks are great, and I would highly recommend them if you find yourself in the Los Angeles area. Anyway, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe to have a thrilling rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.